So Phil, you and I go back a long way
Yes.
to 1975 when you were a student at U of H, interning in the newsroom where I was a reporter. I still remember you very well. You had long hair. You dressed like a college student.
Right.
I mean, you were someone else.
Yes.
I mean, you've come a long, long way, and it happened for you relatively quickly. I mean, you got a job not long after an internship.
Well, and that had a lot to do with that experience at KHOU. It gave me a foundation in the business, and it was really a better education than journalism school for the business, and I learned from people like you, and all the other iconoclast and free thinkers that inhabited that newsroom at the time. It was just great.
Because, you know, if you go to college to become a doctor and you graduate, you're a doctor, a dentist or an optometrist or whatever, but you go to school to be a reporter and you get out of school, you're not a reporter. You have to actually do it.
Yeah.
To become a reporter, there's a process that takes years. And your process began, what, in 1976?
Well, 75, when I got the internship. And I found a job pretty quickly after that at the old Houston News Service. It was a local wire service patterned on the Chicago news service, which was legendary. And we fed radio stations and a couple of the television stations, mostly with audio clips. But we had a teletype, we had a wire, and I was the first photographer, and what they started doing with me was providing film for crime stories that happened after everybody at Channel 2 had gone home for the day.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, again, that was an extenuation of my education, and it was great education. I got to learn the business in about, well, the rudiments in about 6 months.
Because we've been learning for the better part of 50 years.
Yeah, as you and I were talking about, that you never stop learning. And you never get so good that you've got it nailed.
Well, and because the technology has changed. You know, you mentioned film. That's how we recorded stories in those days, on 16 millimeter film. And we had the old manual typewriters, and then came videotape and Selectric, and then computers, and the ability to go live, and all the things that we've grown up with in our time.
Right. Right, and which do you prefer? Would you want to roll it back to film and?
Oh no, not anymore. But in the beginning, I really was uncomfortable with the change, the technological changes. But what it allows us to do now, and to service the viewer that fast, is really remarkable.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I didn't think of this myself. I've seen various arguments from people inside the business that we have gotten to the point where the technology has outrun the human ability to absorb it.
In many cases, yes, that's correct.
Turn it around and broadcast it.
Yeah.
And as you know, I mean, we were just talking about your trips overseas where you're locked to the satellite. That's your life, and you don't get any sleep.
But things happen so quickly now. When you see a reporter in the field say, "This is a very active scene," that's code for I don't know what's going on. I just got here, you know, and you're still reporting as it happens,
as you're broadcasting, and that's a much different skill set. You're absolutely right.
You're a very versatile reporter. You've covered, you know, the whole plethora of news story. Politics you're strong with politics, with crime news, with breaking news like hurricanes. In 2020 and 2021, we've seen, like never before, civil unrest in which news folks have been injured, in some cases seriously. This began for you at the very beginning of your career, in 1978, when you were covering the Moody Park riot. Right,
with Jack Cato. Yeah. And I should say, look, that's been sort of a standard fixture in journalism, that you often have to go into risky situations. People have been hurt and killed plying their craft because they were dedicated to it. Yeah. Jack and I were just following the police radios that day.
You were stabbed. You could have bled out had you not been helped.
Yeah.
On the scene that night.
Yeah, and it was a couple of kids, I think 12-year-old and his younger brother, who saw me in the gutter bleeding and drugged me out so that the...
Have you had a chance to thank them?
I did. And the station did at the time, and I ran into one of them a few years later, and we had a nice lunch at the Avenue Grill.
Yeah.
And talked about those days.
In the 40 years you and I have worked together here at this wonderful news organization, I've had thousands of occasions to say, here with the story is Phil Archer, at here, there, or somewhere else. And the things that stand out to me in the stories you cover, which are always very thorough and very fair, is your ability to cover breaking news like hurricanes. Your work at Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Harvey in 2017 were truly exemplary. And people, as you're retiring, are praising you for your work.
Right, which I'm not used to.
Yeah.
So,
you were out there in a boat helping people. You had to take your reporter cap off and kind of put the "I need to help people" here.
Right. Well, I mean, in a situation as dire as Harvey and Katrina were, you can't not. If somebody needs you, you got to help.
Yeah.
And that's not just me. I mean, plenty of other folks on our staff are doing the same thing. Katrina, one of the top stories of my career. I mean, it was just fascinating. It was almost like being in a foreign country by the time we were a week into that story. Harvey was actually harder for me to wrap my arms around the story because it was so immense.
Yeah.
Yes, it was huge and so many people affected, and for so long.
Yeah.
We lived with Harvey for a year or two after Harvey.
Right.
So, I mean, those are great experiences. If people have been asking me, well, what's the most important story you think you covered, or the one
tough
that's most
question to
interesting?
answer.
Well, it's got to be the one we're in now. Really, COVID-19.
I was going to ask you, I left before this COVID thing. It must be an incredible challenge to cover not only the pandemic,
right,
but your ability to get out there and cover it.
Well, and there are some minor alterations. Yeah, we don't travel in the same car together with photographers, and we go by the rules. You stay separate and take all the precautions. But I don't remember a story in my lifetime that has affected our society, our individual members of our society.
It's global.
That has been. I mean, everything we do right now revolves around COVID and the vaccine and progress of that of combating it and the light that we're finally seeing at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's going to be a top story. Well through this year and probably into next, for sure.
Incidentally, we're sitting here unmasked, and it's because we're both old guys and we both had both our shot, our vaccination. So we're safe to each other while our photographers are masked. And everyone else in the business, the building here.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been challenging this year. Yeah.
It has, but I think it's challenging. We work around stuff all the time. You know that. You used to,
That's the business.
Yeah. You have
Workarounds, yeah.
You have to make things work. And so we've done that okay. The physical ramifications of that, separate cars and that sort of thing, are not that tough. But it does appear to me, I think you see it on the street, everyone is anxious. Everyone feels this in here because there's so much uncertainty. As we gradually get a little of that back, I think people are starting to settle down some. But we're not there by a long shot, and a lot of people are still right on the edge now. I mean, there are plenty of people in Houston right now that don't know if they're going to be living in their apartments next month, or where their next check's coming from.
Going to contract this disease
or
and die.
Get sick and the worst possible outcome. So it's quite a story, and I'm glad I could be here at the tail end of my career to cover some of it.
You know, I have to confess to you that I was kind of glad I wasn't here to cover it. I mean, this building's empty right now because everybody's working, remotely out of safety concerns.
Right.
It's very different. The one big story of the
of
the century, and I missed it. But I don't regret,
Well,
I don't
you
regret
picked
it.
up plenty of others. I
Yeah.
mean, I think your body of work speaks pretty well for itself.
And so does yours. Tell me something about your thoughts and how our work helps people, how it serves our community.
Oh, I mean, I believe this when I was a shaved tail in 1975, and I believe it now. I don't think there's any more important service that you can provide than accurate, timely information that affects people's lives. I mean, we're talking about COVID. Well, people make decisions in their lives, life and death decisions, based on what we tell them. And that's a huge responsibility. And you can't take that lightly, or certainly you shouldn't take it lightly. So I think I've always been proud to be a reporter. I think a good reporter is the noblest work of God. And that, there's always criticism.
Sure. The media is under attack today like never before.
Right. Well, I don't know. Maybe not like never before. Well, it's amplified now because we've got more outlets to amplify it, right? We've got internet, aside from and all the cable
Social
channels
media,
and
right.
all that. But the media is never really, in this country, if you look at the American journalism, the length and breadth of American journalism, we haven't been respectable for that long. I mean, the 19th century certainly not. In the
Yellow
early 20th
journalism
century,
those days, yeah.
Yeah. So the criticism, I mean, that just comes with the territory, and you deal with it, and you try to prove the critics wrong by doing the best possible job.
And there are some practitioners of this craft that do it better than others, and you are
Yes.
being lauded as one of those. On social media, I'm really pleased to see people give you the praise you deserve. in my
I
opinion.
got to tell you, I'm overwhelmed by it. I really am. If I'd known so many people were going to say such nice things about me, I'd have left earlier. I mean, it's just.
Let's talk about that. How long have you been thinking about retirement?
Probably about 5 years. You hit 65 and you need to start, you have
Yeah.
to start thinking about it. And I decided 70 would probably be a good cutoff date, I mean, give somebody else a chance.
Yeah.
Get out of the way and let some young blood come in. But I'm glad that I stayed as long as I did, and I didn't take early retirement. I love this job, and
Yes.
I love this institution, and I love this city. This is the best news market in the United States. There is always something going on here that the rest of the world is interested in.
And have you noticed that something can happen in a far-flung place on this globe, and there's always a Houston
There's
connection?
a Houston guy involved or woman involved.
Yeah.
That's true.
It truly is a great news market.
How do you, when you look at, I'm going to ask, let me interview you a
Sure,
little bit.
go ahead.
When I look at the city, when you and I were at Channel 11, as compared to now, what's the biggest change? How do you see we've progressed? How's the city changed?
Well, in the early 1970s, Houston was a completely different place, not only in how it looks. There was no skyline to begin with.
Right.
You could still see the Nils Esperson building,
And the
driving
Gulf
on the
sign.
periphery of downtown. Now it's so obscured, I don't think I could find it in 30 minutes.
Right.
But aside from that, this town is just completely different. You remember, back in the early 70s, it wasn't unusual to hear the N-word used on the police dispatch radio. This was a different place.
Yes.
And I really believe that this city grew out of that because of the news media. I think the news media woke the city up to change
Right.
for the better. And then the other part of it is we're 4 times the size, population-wise, that we were 47 years ago. And we've taken in people from all over the world. I think I heard the mayor say one time, 64 countries are represented in our population
Right.
here. So with that comes change.
Yeah, well, my view, I guess, is similar. When I moved here from North Texas in 1969, and it was a fascinating place then. It was huge and sprawling like it is now, but it felt like the epicenter of the world. Everybody was coming here to get rich in the oil business.
That's right.
And it was a big, sprawling boom town. It was like, I think of it in its progression as that was maybe Houston's teenage years.
Yep.
It was still pretty raw, and it was
It was
still
very raw.
still, yeah, and still pretty much a southern city or a East Texas city. There wasn't segregation, but there was de facto segregation. Everybody lived in their own neighborhoods.
We were
That
only
sort of thing.
5 years ahead of the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
I mean, things were still pretty raw, as you say.
And look where we are now.
Yeah.
The most diverse city in the United States. It doesn't matter who your parents are or where your family came from. If you want to get out and do the work, you can advance, you can flourish in Houston, Texas.
America has that wonderful capability, but no place more than Houston.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, in thinking about retirement, a lot's going to change for you, I can tell you. I mean, no more deadlines, no more action. You know, you're on the inside right now, but on Friday you'll be on the outside.
Right.
And it's a really strange feeling. Have you given any thought to that?
Well, yeah, I haven't given enough thought to retirement, quite frankly. I mean, you and I talked about this a little earlier briefly. I haven't got any plans yet or where I'm going to go, and I guess it's naturally that you would miss the routine that you've become accustomed to over almost 5 decades. So I'm just waiting to see how it goes. My favorite quote about retirement from our friend Craig Roberts, when he was asked about what he missed most in retirement, he says, direct deposit.
Yeah. That's something that you really have to get used to, not getting a paycheck anymore.
Yeah.
But you prepare for it over time, and that's always part of the equation of I'm going to retire. So you say you have no plans in retirement.
Well, Joy and I have talked about traveling a little bit. I mean, I've been to Europe once on a business trip, and that means you were there, but you didn't see anything. So
Right.
there are places I'd like to go and see.
It's a big world out there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You have the freedom to go see without a deadline, or without a series of deadlines
Right.
to meet. So you have your freedom to do it.
Yeah, this would be a good place for me to say this. I wouldn't have made it this far without Joy Archer. God bless her. She is a saint. She is my #1 fan and my greatest support through all the tribute. And if you're in this business, your family kind of has to take second place sometimes, like when Harvey happens. I mean, I can't remember how many hurricanes she's weathered without me there.
Yeah.
And that's a big sacrifice. So she'll be happy, I think, that's not going to be the norm anymore.
Yeah. She is a wonderful woman. I agree with you. And she's going to have you all to herself now. And that's a great feeling, that freedom to be able to, as you say, travel.
Right.
When I retired, I planned to travel, but then COVID hit and you couldn't go anywhere,
Right.
even out of the house. So I might run into you somewhere.
Well, I'm going to call you up and let's take a trip. I mean, got nothing else to do, right?
I'd love to do it.
I mean, you're going to get tired of making cigar boxes for me at some point.
It's good to have a hobby. So I was wondering, now you do have a hobby. You at some point in the past couple of decades, you developed an interest in horses.
Yeah.
And sort of the cowboy life,
Right.
for want of a better.
If you own livestock, you've got a hobby that has to be fed every day.
Was the livestock show and rodeo the genesis of that for you?
I like to ride,
Yeah.
but I grew up in basically a small city. We didn't ride. We weren't cowboys. My dad was an ran a construction company. So what happened was, this is how I got into horses. Roland was invited to a team penning, which is a horseback event where you basically herd 3 cows and put them in a pen.
Yeah.
And he couldn't make it. So he said, you interested in doing this? Because I'd done some rodeo coverage. And I said, sure. So I went out there and everybody was just effusive. Glad to have you. Here, we got your horse for you. Here's how you do it. And just sort of aimed me at it. And I went and did it. And I was hooked after that.
You became quite good at it.
Well,
Cutting horses. Did you win a
There's some of the guys I ride with that would argue that.
Did you win a competition or two along the way?
I've won some. I kind of got into cutting horses, which is just the most fun you can have if you can arrange it. I've got that, and I've still got a horse. We're down to one horse. I don't think I need to acquire any more. A friend of mine who has 20 of them once quipped that you need to think hard and long about acquiring a hobby that eats while you're asleep. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's still that. I'm interested in that, and I've got plenty of weekend cowboy friends to go ride with, so I'll probably be doing some more of that.
What are you going to miss most about this?
About this? I don't know. I'll know when I get there, but I'm kind of guessing that the action, there's always something to engage you when you walk in the door. And
every day is new and different?
Right.
I mean, there's no homework. You go at you met your deadline. It's over till tomorrow. So you don't take any work home with you. And that's one thing I've always found attractive about the business.
Right.
But
yes.
You're right. I was expecting to say action because your life will go from 160 miles an hour to zero on Friday.
Oh, I can foresee a situation where I'm watching TV, talking to it about, no, that's not right. Cover that way, that kind of thing.
It's very difficult to watch the news and not be a part of it. I'll tell you that. I mean, it truly is. It's to see your friends still plying the craft and watching with the critical eye only a former reporter can have.
Well, maybe they need to bring you back for some guest spots. I mean...
Yeah, I was telling the news director a while ago, sign me up on board. I'm ready to come, I'm ready to come back.
No, that night, Bill put up a really nice Facebook post about me and retirement the other day and got this string of responses. And at least half of them weren't saying, we got to keep Archer. They were saying, we need to bring you back. We need to put you on TV.
I think that you and I are really blessed to have accumulated along the way a lot of people we didn't know were there who respected and enjoyed our work, and that there's no higher compliment. And and there are all these people there. No, Phil, retiring.
Well, I think the thing, as I've had to start thinking about retiring, giving it up, the thing I most feel is gratitude for those folks, for all those folks that invite us into their homes all these years and like us and appreciate.
And have many other choices.
Right, and appreciate the work we do.
Yeah.
I also feel a great deal of gratitude for all of those guys.
The history of this station is on the walls here behind us, going way back to the beginning in the 1950s. And yours begins in the 70s, mine in 80, all the way down to today.
Well, the same guys that hired me, most of the same guys that hired me, and most of them were guys, also hired you. But I wouldn't be here without the kindness of strangers. These were, first of all, that generation of broadcasters, they were true pioneers. They invented this business.
Yes.
This television station in the 50s and 60s developed techniques and ways of doing things that the networks picked up. We were always an innovator.
And used some of our people at times to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those, Ray Miller and Harris and Jim McGrew, Jack Harris and Jim McGrew. And I'm going to leave people out. Larry Weidman. I mean, I shouldn't even start this because there's so many.
And some of our engineers who've been so integral.
The guys behind the scenes who never get laudits.
David Tung.
Yeah. David Tung.
Yeah.
Rusty.
An engineer who, and this station brought the moon landing to people.
Yeah.
We flipped the switch that put the whole thing on TV.
Yeah. All of these, I mean, they're all bigger than life to me. I mean, and still are. And to this day, if I'm writing a story and I'm getting ready to submit it, I always think, well, would this be up to Ray Miller's standard?
The news director who hired you.
The guy who hired me and who was iconic. The word legend's getting thrown around a lot. That guy was a legend. And I think I left out Jack Cato. They broke the mold. I mean, Jack Cato was the preeminent police reporter in the world as far as I was concerned. He was straight out of Damon Runyon.
Yeah.
You know, always had a cigar. You could tell what he'd had for lunch by looking at his tie. And he knew what was going on generally, often before the cops knew.
Sure.
He was just that good and a great teacher. All of those guys, I mean, I feel incredibly lucky to have been taken under their wing, and for no other reason than they're just going to help me out. I mean, there was no reason for them to pay any attention to me at all, but they all did, and they taught me this trade, and I'm eternally grateful for them.
And plying this craft depends in large part on the sources you develop
Yes.
over the many decades.
Right.
And those sources are seeing you leave. I mean, it's an end of an era here at KPRC.
I guess so, but that's probably only by virtue of I'm the I'm the last guy to check out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who's left here now. The oldest or the most senior on-air personality. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, but our generation, I'm pretty much the end of our generation.
Yeah. I think you probably have worked here longer than any reporter in the history of this television. I'm sure you have.
Maybe.
I don't think that anybody's worked 44 years at this television station as a reporter.
That's probably true, and that's odd for the business, as you know, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's generally a young person's game, and generally the way you advance is by working someplace for 2 years and going someplace else for 2 years. But I have to say, when I came to work here in '76, all of the people, just about everybody here, had been here when they flipped the switch on. They were all pioneers.
Yeah.
They'd, from the get-go. And it was, that of course was under the Hobby family. They owned the station then. And it was pretty much understood, if you do your job, you've got a job. You know, we're not gonna get rid of you because we don't like the way you're parting your hair or something like that. It was about craft and confidence. And I always have appreciated that.
And you know as I do that there's no other station we know of, certainly not here or anywhere else, that has run so many lengthy careers among its staff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not unusual to have people who have worked here 40, 50 years.
Yep.
And that's part of the strength of this organization.
Yeah, I agree. Now, that's changing in the industry, and we're feeling some of that too. But we still have, you know, it's still a place where you can ply your craft and have a good career and a pretty good life because, again, we care, or this organization cares about craft and confidence. And you know what? I feel like I need to say something about Jerry Martin. Because
the general manager,
who I think has been with us 10 years now. I think it's about 10 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the first thing a general manager does when they come into a new place is get rid of everybody over 12.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that sounded.
No, but we get the drift.
You know, it's a young man's
He's responsible for this legacy work here because he understands how important legacy is to this station.
And I salute that. He has been very supportive of me in my autumn years, and I appreciate that very much.
Well, you're very fortunate because you started here with a great general manager, Jack Harris, Colonel Jack Harris, and Ray Miller, news director. You leave on another strong team in Jerry Martin and Dave Strickland, who's the news director here.
Which is the reason I'm sure they're going to be just fine without me.
No, I think I know they've told you that it's a big loss to have someone with your breadth of knowledge and experience leave. Somebody who's done it this long develops a base of knowledge and experience that's hard to replicate. Impossible. You know, so you're going to be missed here.
Well, and I'm going to, if I get calls, I'm going to pass them along. I mean, I may still dabble in a little bit.
I don't doubt it one bit.
Well, it's hard to divorce yourself from the place that has been home for most of your adult life, as you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I'm going to go campaign for you to come back on the air in some fashion.
You know, we'll see what the future holds. Phil, congratulations on an outstanding career. You are seriously the best news reporter I've ever known, and you're going to be missed, not only by this station, but by this community.
You know, coming from you, that's high praise. I appreciate it very much. I can't tell you how wonderful that is.